You wake up cold. The silk mattress beneath you is sticky with old sweat. Your skin is slick, not from exertion, but from the stifling heat of the tatami room, where light never enters and air moves only when the door slides open for your inspection. You are 16 or 15. You don't know anymore. It was summer when you were taken. Now the wind rattles the shutters with winter's breath. You are dressed in white, a robe too fine for your station, yet it chafes like a collar. The scent of incense clings to you, sickly sweet, masking the stench of male desire and stale tears. Your mouth is dry, your body aches, you hear sandals padding on the wooden floor outside. You are not allowed to speak, you must be still, you must smile. Tonight, the shogun chooses again, and you pray, silently, desperately, that it will not be you, but it will be. And this is only the beginning. What you are about to witness is not legend or fiction. This is a story erased by silence, the life of a male concubine in ancient Japan. Trained, broken, displayed. And it is far worse than most can bear to remember. Before we journey into these forgotten tales of survival and suffering, if you enjoy uncovering the hidden truths of history, please consider liking this video and hitting that subscribe button for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. They called him Katsuro. Born in the shadow of Kyoto in the early years of the Edo period, Katsuro was the third son of a rice merchant who had borrowed too heavily and paid too late. At 9, Katsuro was sold. Not into slavery, at least not officially. He was apprenticed, groomed, promised a future of comfort in the service of the elite. The Yujo system had long been institutionalized for women, but there was a quieter, more insidious demand growing in the shogun's court. Beautiful boys, skilled in performance, fluent in etiquette, untouched yet taught to please. These were the wakashu. Katsuro's body was ideal. Delicate shoulders, large eyes, a mouth too expressive for safety. He was taken to a secluded estate in Edo, under the care of attendants who bathed him in oils, fed him rice and fish, arranged like paintings, and corrected every movement with sharp fans and softer threats. He was forbidden to age. His eyebrows were shaved, his teeth blackened just so, his voice trained to hold a soft, lilting tone. He was not a boy, he was not yet a man, he was an ornament, a possession. He would serve in the Nanshoku quarters of the inner palace, a place hidden from maps and unmarked in the records. The men who trained there were called by many names, none of them their own. But even as Katsuro's body was being polished and perfected, his spirit began to fray. He missed his mother's broth, his brother's laughter, the sour smoke of the market where he once played. Here, silence was currency. Emotion was punished, and every night he was reminded of what awaited when his training was complete. What happened next was not punishment, it was protocol. Katsuro was escorted through a stone corridor lit by candlelight, the wax dripping like melting flesh down rusted sconces. He was taken to the Kagemusha chambers, a training hall far from the polished serenity of the palace proper. There were no windows, no seasons, no names. Here, boys like Katsuro were taught how to serve. He was made to kneel for hours without shifting, not on mats, but on coarse wood. If he moved, he was struck. If he wept, he was laughed at. When he vomited from the pressure of being force-fed sweetness while forced to smile, the attendants scolded him not for the mess, but for the indecency of breaking the illusion. The wakashu Do code demanded obedience and grace, not just compliance, performance. Their bodies were treated like clay, shaped by massage, oil, and threat. They were forbidden to grow facial hair. Any sign of maturation was shaved, plucked, or scrubbed away with ash and vinegar. At night, they were given perfumed silks to sleep in. During the day, they were led through rehearsals, bowing, dancing, ceremonial drinking. Katsuro's every gesture was graded. Then came the touch. It began subtly. An older boy demonstrating how to pour sake, his hand too close, a sensei adjusting posture, holding the small of the back too long. It was not considered abuse, it was refinement. Those in charge spoke in the language of beauty, not violence. They praised Katsuro's submission. They said his tears were evidence of purity. When the first nobleman was brought to test him, Katsuro was made to smile and sing. He was 13. The act was not sudden, it was ritual. He remembered the scent of camellia oil, the lacquered floor biting into his knees, the way he was told to hold still as his body betrayed him with tremors. He did not scream. That was the lesson. There was no virtue in refusal. Resistance was punished as disrespect. To say no was to dishonor your host. Institutional complicity made everything appear sacred. The onagata, former male courtesans who now trained others, spoke in riddles. They told the boys suffering was the path to refinement, that to please was to ascend. Katsuro learned to disassociate, to leave his body behind, while his shell obeyed commands. He learned to cry silently, to brace in advance. And he was not alone. The other boys, some younger, were in different stages of transformation. Some grew pale and slow, eyes dull from endless submission. Others, older, became cruel, abusing the younger boys with the same techniques used on them. Survival required forgetting or becoming like those who hurt you. Once, a boy named Haruki tried to run. He slipped past the guards, made it to the outer gate. They found him in the morning, frozen by the river, his feet stripped of flesh from running barefoot in the frost. They held a silent tea ceremony that afternoon. No one mentioned his name again. This was not a single incident, not the result of bad actors. It was the system itself, wrapped in culture, language, and ceremony. It was masked by poetry, excused through lineage, enforced by tradition. Katsuro learned to fold his pain into elegance. He danced when called. He bathed in petals. He was displayed. But even as Katsuro grew into the image of perfection, a fracture was forming deep within him. To understand the true horror, we must now examine the system's purpose and the price of its perfection. But even within those gilded walls, something unspoken began to rot. The court loved the illusion. The shogun's visitors, daimyo, poets, monks of high rank praised the beauty of the wakashu as proof of Japan's cultural refinement. The Tokugawa regime encouraged a vision of order and ritual, harmony and elegance. But beneath the surface of that still water, boys like Katsuro were being slowly drowned. The system worked because it pretended not to exist. These were not slaves, they were companions, not violated, but admired. The line between reverence and abuse was blurred, then erased, hidden behind layers of tradition and euphemism. What Katsuro endured was not called rape, it was called instruction. When he was summoned in silence and stripped before a room of men, it was called display. When he bled, he was told to wash thoroughly and speak nothing of it. He was 14 when he first began to forget entire days. At first, it was just moments. A tea ceremony blurred into a bath. a dance performance forgotten entirely except for the bruises on his thighs afterward. His mind began to shield him. This was not madness. It was adaptation. To survive, Katsuro created a space inside himself where no one could enter. A locked garden, buried deep. In public, he was perfect. He performed No, with movements as fluid as ink across paper. His poetry dictated to scribes who never questioned his trembling hands was praised at court. His lips, always painted, hid the scar where one tooth had been broken during a drunken encounter with a provincial lord. He was called Utsukushi, beautiful. He was called Takarabako, a treasure chest. He was never called human. Some boys succumbed completely, becoming cold and mechanical, repeating rituals like ghosts. Others broke visibly, refusing food, clawing at their own skin in the night. Those were removed. No one said where. Their names were struck from the rolls, their rooms scrubbed clean. Katsuro, caught between the two extremes, found solace in fleeting moments of connection. There was a boy, Akihiro, 2 years older, with long fingers and a sharp laugh. Akihiro taught him how to fake pleasure, how to dissociate more completely. He once whispered, "Think of snow. Let it fall inside you, cover everything." They would lie together sometimes, not touching, simply breathing in rhythm. It was not love, but something like mercy. Akihiro disappeared one spring. No one told Katsuro why. After that, he stopped asking questions. Still, there were moments of resistance, tiny rebellions hidden in gestures. Once, Katsuro deliberately misquoted a verse during a poetry recitation, twisting its meaning from devotion to mockery. No one noticed. Another time, he bit down, hard, during an encounter, drawing blood. He was beaten for it, but he felt strangely alive afterward, like something inside him still refused to die. The palace watched, but did not care. The men wanted submission, not rebellion. The attendants preferred silence. The poets wrote verses about the beauty of fleeting youth, never naming the hands that crushed it. Meanwhile, Katsuro learned to survive within the contradictions. He made his body a mask. He smiled with perfect stillness. He told himself he was wind. He told himself he was water. He told himself he was nothing. But no one can remain nothing forever. And when the mask began to slip, when the fractures widened, it was not the system that would break. It was Katsuro. As Katsuro approached his 17th year, a change began to sweep through Edo. The political climate was tightening. The Tokugawa shogunate, once eager to flaunt its cultural supremacy, now grew suspicious of pleasure itself. Foreign pressure loomed on the horizon. Whispers of Western ships at the edges of Japanese waters stirred paranoia. Moral reform followed. The Bakufu began to quietly recalibrate its image, cracking down on visible extravagance. Public brothels were censored. The Nanshoku salons were now deemed too decadent, too vulnerable to criticism. But behind these political tides, the court's appetite did not fade. It merely became more secretive, more brutal, and those still trapped inside its perfumed prisons bore the weight of a world that wanted both their silence and their beauty. Katsuro was no longer considered a boy. His voice had changed despite the medicine. His body had grown, and with it the danger of replacement. When a new child was brought in, small, delicate, soft-spoken Katsuro was made to dress him, to wash him, to prepare him. The boy's name was Naoki. He was 10. Katsuro looked at him and saw his own reflection from 7 years before, trembling, uncertain, full of a desperate, flickering hope. That night, Katsuro did not sleep. He sat upright in the dark, fists clenched on his lap, heart beat louder than the wind outside. Something in him shifted, not rage, not even sorrow. A kind of inevitability. The mask cracked. 3 nights later, Katsuro was summoned to entertain a visiting magistrate from Osaka, a man known for cruelty and discretion. As Katsuro performed the tea ritual, kneeling with the lacquer bowl between his hands, the man reached out to stroke his cheek. Katsuro looked up and smiled. Then, in one motion, he tipped the scalding tea over the magistrate's lap. Screams filled the chamber. The man leapt up, clutching at his robes. Guards rushed in. Katsuro sat still, eyes unblinking, hands folded in his lap. The magistrate struck him across the face. Blood filled Katsuro's mouth, but he did not wipe it. He was taken away without ceremony, not to be beaten, not to be questioned, to be erased. He was locked alone in a narrow chamber beneath the training quarters. No window, no food, no bedding. Only a flickering lamp and the smell of mildew, sweat, and rot. Days passed without sound. Hunger carved his stomach into hollows. He hallucinated Akihiro's voice. He dreamed of Naoki's eyes, wide and watching. He spoke aloud to his mother, though he had forgotten her face. By the 4th day, he no longer stood. On the 7th, he began to sing. Not the soft-court melodies he was taught. Something else, wordless, animal, a howl swallowed by the stone walls. And then it stopped. The attendants came in silence, washed him, clothed him in plain linen, and returned him to the servants' wing. He had been demoted, not discarded. Not because of mercy, but because the system was crumbling. The shogun's court needed no scandal, no dead boys. Better to repurpose him as a mute shadow, someone unseen. The worst had already been done. What remained was a kind of afterlife. He watched from the margins now. He saw Naoki led away by the same hands that once shaped him. He saw other boys vanish and be replaced. He saw the old routines continue, uninterrupted, as if none of them had ever mattered. This was the climax not of drama, but of erasure. The moment where a life once polished to brilliance was reduced to a whisper. Not because Katsuro had failed the system, but because he had survived it. Only when the cherry blossoms returned did anyone speak his name again. It was whispered by a palace servant, passed like a rumor. Katsuro had been moved to a minor shrine outside the city, not as a punishment, but as a convenience. There he cleaned altars, lit incense, served rice to travelling monks who never asked about his past. His body bore the marks of its history, joints too stiff for his age, teeth worn down from grinding through pain, a voice that rarely rose above a whisper. His beauty had faded, but the ghost of it lingered in his stillness. He was perhaps 20 when he was finally forgotten by the court entirely. The Nanshoku chambers continued for a few more years, though quietly and with fewer boys. By the mid-19th century, under foreign scrutiny and Meiji reform, the practice was stamped out officially. Not from remorse, but from embarrassment. Japan, eager to present itself as modern and enlightened, buried the evidence of its contradictions. No monuments were raised for the boys who had been taken. No records kept of their names. The art remained, the poems endured, the aesthetic survived. But the cost, the broken bodies behind the elegance, were written out of the story. Katsuro died in obscurity, likely of illness, or starvation, or simply the slow decay that comes from decades of disassociation. No one recorded the year. The shrine where he worked was later absorbed into a larger temple complex. His name faded into anonymity. He became what the system always intended: invisible. But we must remember, because this was not merely a tale of one boy's suffering, but a reflection of a system that prized beauty above humanity. It is tempting to speak only of Japanese aesthetics, of haiku, of calligraphy, of delicate rituals. Yet behind every era's refinement lies its victims. And often those victims were children. What Katsuro endured is not unique to Japan. Similar systems have emerged wherever power meets unchecked desire. Ottoman harems, Roman slave brothels, even modern trafficking networks hidden in the shadows of global cities. The tools change. The silence does not. We cannot comfort ourselves with the thought that this is all ancient history. When a culture values appearance over empathy, when systems reward obedience and punish pain, when children are treated as property masked in poetry, we repeat these cycles. So let us not turn away. Let us speak his name, even if it was never written in ink. Let us remember that behind every myth of courtly beauty, there are stories of blood, silence, and survival waiting to be heard. And Katsuro was one of them.